Up next, some big-name MAGA influencers and White House officials are lashing out and crashing out after a huge court decision just went against the Trump administration on its tariffs and trade wars. Here's some coverage from CNBC about the big decision that was just handed down.
This really significant news overnight as the Court of International Trade struck down the tariffs that the president has imposed for reasons of economic emergency. And as you said, that has been most of what we've seen so far this term. So a 3-judge panel ruled unanimously that the statute he used, known as IEEPA, does not grant the president the authority to impose as broad of tariffs as we've seen. They wrote that IEEPA does not give unbounded tariff authority to the president and that the statute can only be used for unusual and extraordinary threats. They said they don't believe the trade deficit fits that definition. So the ruling will impact all the tariffs Trump has imposed this term against Canada, Mexico, and China. Also impacts the 10% baseline tariff on all nations and those so-called reciprocal tariffs on other trading partners. So the court essentially gave the administration 10 calendar days to implement this ruling and stop collecting the tariffs. Now, the White House did already file plans to appeal. It will also separately have to ask for an administrative stay in order to keep the tariffs in place for now. We are very likely to see that in the next few days as well. And a White House spokesman, meantime, rebuking the court last night, saying that, quote, "It is not for unelected judges to decide how to properly address a national emergency," and that, quote, "the administration is committed to using every lever of executive power to address the crisis of non-reciprocal trade and deficits."
So this ruling was handed down by a 3-judge panel, and the judges on there include one Obama appointee, one Reagan appointee, and one Trump appointee. So it is an ideologically and politically diverse group of judges, but they all unanimously agreed that the Trump administration's attempt to institute tariffs unilaterally without Congress passing legislation, just all via executive order, these huge across-the-board tariffs, is unlawful. Why? Well, because the Constitution explicitly gives Congress the right to levy taxes and tariffs, not the president. Reading from the decision here. The Constitution assigns Congress the exclusive powers to, quote, "lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, and to regulate commerce with foreign nations." The question in the 2 cases before the court is whether the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 delegates these powers to the president in the form of authority to impose unlimited tariffs on goods from nearly every country in the world. The court does not read IEEPA, that law, to confer such unbounded authority and sets aside the challenged tariffs imposed thereunder. Now, the law that the court is referencing here is a federal statute that delegates some of Congress's tariff authority to the president to take targeted steps to specifically address a pressing urgent national emergency. But, and this is again from the court decision, IEEPA further provides that these authorities may only, quote, "be exercised to deal with an unusual and extraordinary threat with respect to which a national emergency has been declared for purposes of this chapter and may not be exercised for any other purpose." So this law had never previously been invoked to justify unilateral tariffs and is only supposed to be used to address specific urgent national emergencies. But Trump tried to use it to impose blanket tariffs on almost every good from almost every country. The court said, you actually can't do that. If you want those tariffs, you have to get them passed through Congress, which then it would be legitimate and they would likely be upheld. The Trump administration tried to justify the national emergency argument based on saying that the trade deficit, the fact that we export more goods than import, is a national emergency, urgent, that requires these steps to redress it. But we've had a trade deficit for decades. It's not a new problem. It's not a pressing problem. And the same is true for some of the other national emergencies they tried to invoke, like fentanyl coming over from Canada. The tariffs really don't do much to address that and are, again, applied to lots of different countries, not just even narrow to that scope. So this goes far beyond the scope of that federal law, which is supposed to give just limited authorization, yet the Trump administration tried to just use it as a blanket authorization to do unilateral, across-the-board global tariffs all by itself. That's not how the Constitution works. That is illegal, and it is unconstitutional, and these judges are correct in their decision, in my view. But some very prominent MAGA personalities are lashing out and making claims of a judicial coup because of this ruling. For example, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller tweeted, "We are living under judicial tyranny," in response to this ruling. The popular MAGA account Cat Turd tweeted after this news, "Judicial activist commies will not win." Charlie Kirk tweeted, "In a sweeping new ruling, the U.S. Court of International Trade has just blocked President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs, saying that authority is with Congress. With activist judges, what is even the point of having a president?" Charlie then posts a fact check, which cites the incorrect law. It doesn't cite the appropriate law that Trump actually imposed the tariffs under. So I find this pushback absurd. The courts specifically exist to rule on the legality and constitutionality of executive actions and to reinforce the separation of powers. That's what they did here. Trump tried to go too far. He tried to do stuff by himself because he couldn't get it passed through Congress like he's supposed to. And they said, hey, no, you can't do that. That's not a judicial coup. They're not taking over the tariff power for themselves and saying, no, only judges can impose tariffs now. The Constitution be damned. No, well, to be clear, some of the complaints about judicial activism or obstruction may ring true in other cases. In this case, it absolutely does not. They are properly enforcing the separation of powers and doing the exact role that this court for trade was created by Congress to do. And they're not commie judges. This is a Trump appointee, a Reagan appointee, and an Obama appointee. And you're saying, what, did Trump appoint commie judges, really, just because they disagree with something he's doing? If anything, to me, that makes it more credible that Trump is wrong on the law. If it was all Democratic appointed judges, maybe you could say, well, they're just biased against Trump. But you've got an across the board spectrum here, still ruling against the president. Maybe that should prompt a little bit of introspection from these MAGA influencers that maybe dear leader isn't always perfect and might actually be in the wrong this time. Now, you guys know that I am generally pretty opposed to tariffs, but if Trump goes about it the right way, if he gets Congress to pass a bill enacting these tariffs and signs it into law, then I'll still disagree with it on the merits, but I won't have any legal objection to it. And I don't think that in that case, in that scenario, a legal challenge would succeed. I think the judges would uphold it. And if somehow the judicial activists still blocked it, even after he went through the correct process, then maybe you would have some credible claims about judicial activism or obstruction. But that's not the case here. And I think it's irresponsible for these MAGA influencers to delegitimize federal courts and smear them when they're just doing their jobs and faithfully upholding our Constitution as it is written. But what do you guys think? Do you somehow agree with Charlie Kirk, Stephen Miller, and Cat Turd?